This video is brought to you by Filmora, link in the description and the pinned comment. The Xbox and Bethesda showcase is something which I wasn't initially fond of remotely, at least when watching it live. However, given the time to look at the things they actually announced without the terrible pacing created by the Summer Games Fest being dragged out as much as humanly possible, I think Xbox had a pretty good showcase overall. Things like them adding over $600 worth of League of Legends content plus everything else to Game Pass makes the service even more insanely good value, considering how little you pay for it. And this is coming from someone who is not at all interested in League or honestly most of what was announced. One thing that did stand out the most in the event was obviously Starfield, which does not look fantastic. It looks pretty rough. There are tons of issues present within the gameplay they showed and in what they've been clarifying after the event. It is very clear why this game was delayed, and in terms of Bethesda's track record, I find it predominantly unlikely any of these issues will be addressed before launch. I do however want to point out some of the positives seen in the trailer, because I do think the game will be at the very least enjoyable to play, since it is undeniably going to be the equivalent of Fallout 4's and No Man's Sky's baby, if you trust the marketing. The environments showcased during the presentation were truly glorious to look at, and just like normal, Bethesda has not in the slightest disappointed in terms of the worlds they've created or showcased. If this is how the procedural generation ends up looking like in its final form, then this game is going to have one of the best universes to explore in any video game, and could finally be the one game that manages to stand up against No Man's Sky's current procedural generation, just limited to 1,000 worlds, which isn't at all necessarily a negative thing. And the only thing in regards to the Starfield universe making me somewhat worried is the very limited number of cities in comparison to the number of planets. Having only 4 major cities compared to 1,000 planets is certainly not a good ratio, and I'm hoping at the very least we'll see some randomly generated outposts where you can do things you do in cities, because otherwise it's going to be a pretty barren world when it comes to interacting with friendly NPCs. Although as much as the world appears to be exceptional with their very selective and highly edited showcase of gameplay, that same quality unsurprisingly does not carry over to the facial animation shown in the trailer, because my god do they look truly awful. And I can already hear the Bethesda fanboys weirdly exclaim that no one should expect good facial animations from Bethesda, because as we all know, we should never ask for the products we are paying for to improve, even by a slight amount. I do want to make it abundantly clear I don't particularly care for random NPCs to have good facial animations all of the time, but the NPCs who are blatantly meant to be mainline characters shouldn't be as blank as they are, and the NPCs within cities certainly shouldn't be as blank as this one when you are showcasing them. In fairness though, I do have to commend the texturing work in this game in its majority, because it is yet another thing that looks fantastic, and I honestly do find it hilarious how desperate people are to defend this game no matter what. It's always the same backwards excuse as well, with people saying, but it's just a Bethesda game, which I think we can all agree is not a real excuse for anything I brought up, or a real argument against people stating that Starfield does in fact look pretty rough, which it absolutely does. If you guys ever have concerns with how a video game looks pre-launch or post-launch, you should absolutely criticize that video game. The concept of accepting anything a company hands you due to certain aspects looking good has never once resulted in a positive outcome, and neither has blindly trusting trailers. Just look at what happened with Cyberpunk 2077 plus Fallout 76. And that's why today's video is brought to you by Filmora. Wondershare Filmora is an easy to use video editing software with powerful functions like auto beat sync, preset video templates, speed ramping, text to speech, speech to text, and many more video effects, which makes it perfect for you guys to start making your own videos on any subject you want, as anyone can start with Filmora due to its easy to learn interface, even with zero editing skills. And thanks to the fact Wondershare Filmora is more budget friendly compared to other editing software such as Adobe Premiere and Final Cut Pro, it makes it the perfect video editing software for any new editor or experienced editors like myself. With my personal favorite option available in Filmora being keyframing, it is the best solution to solving problems templates cannot. So go to the link in the description or the pinned comment on this video and be sure to get your copy of Wondershare Filmora Filmora, since there is a truly insane amount of value behind it. And with Wondershare Filmora being completely free to try, there is absolutely no reason to not go to the link in the description and give Filmora a shot. But one thing that I definitely don't like about Starfield is how god awful the UI is. Simply put, in its current form, it is the most unfinished and bland designs possible. Frankly, it definitely needs to change by the time the game comes out, and it's not like I hate all of this game's UI. I love some of it. The user interface for the skill system looks fantastic and clean, but when I'm sitting in my mother's deep, dark, desolate basement that contains nothing but my gaming setup, I don't want to be blinded by an almost entirely white background, which doesn't exactly contrast well with any player models. From both an artistic perspective and a player perspective, the UI doesn't look remotely good for the biometric ID and the gun user interface. But I do have to give credit where it's due. In regards to how the solar system map looks fantastic, and so does the shipbuilding UI, along with the No Man's Sky space building UI. However, when making a game, you should be creating a baseline look to your UI, which is missing from Starfield right now. It all looks entirely disconnected from each other. On the other hand, the customization does look phenomenal, and I can't wait to see what kinds of characters people make, because although I do not like the look of the UI, the character building options appear to be the best of the best, and so does the shipbuilding as well as outfit customization they've shown off. The combat, however, does not look remotely good, and no, I am not saying that because of the Fallout 4 copy and paste slow shooting. I am saying it because of the essentially non-existent AI at times. Whilst watching the review, I couldn't help but laugh at how egregiously terrible the AI was. This is Cyberpunk 2077 at launch, and Star Citizen levels of bad AI. The fact these are the clips Bethesda themselves hand-selected to show everyone speaks volumes to how bad the majority of the experience fighting aggressive enemies could be. If this is how the AI responds in what's supposed to be the best showcase of their product, aka a trailer, then I don't want to know what the unseen gameplay clips they didn't use look like. And the space combat doesn't look terrible, but it also doesn't look great when games like Corvus exist, especially when you consider how Todd said they separated space and planets via no seamless travel in order to give the best possible versions of both, which so far they have failed to showcase. The frame rate issues shown during combat are not something I care about at the moment. Optimization tends to happen between the last 3 to 6 months of development, and we have a year left. Although nobody should be expecting Starfield to run above 30 FPS on Xbox, because as discussed by Digital Foundry, the gameplay shown was averaging below 30 FPS. Now, even though I dislike the UI and would love to see improvements, it pales in comparison to the undeniable explorative issues Starfield is going to have if certain things aren't addressed. The lack of seamless travel is something me and a lot of other people were definitely shocked by, considering the fact it's essentially become a staple of any space exploration game, and no, the fact this is an RPG does not change anything. Most RPG aspects are a back-end-esque system, and seamless travel between planets and the systems they are in would not be affected by it. But even if you don't care about seamless travel like I and many others do, it opens up a can of worms which Bethesda seriously needs to address. First of all, we need to be shown how that looks and how it works, because the trailer does not give you a realistic or ideal showcase of space in the game. It shows you flying around a planet and fighting enemies, but what happens if you get too close to a planet? Do you get an out of play area message, and if you are on the planet, can you fly around in your ship? Because if you can't, then exploring planets is likely to be pretty damn boring, unless the planets are minuscule in size, which I hope they aren't. And if we can fly around the planets, then the lack of seamless travel to space will certainly cause severe disconnects as well as problems in general, because the only way it can work decently is if when flying up far enough you simply hit a loading screen and go into space, which would be annoying as fuck if you unintentionally do it, since you'd have to go through multiple loading screens to get back onto the planet. The lack of clarification surrounding this game, even when it comes to integral parts of it when we are merely at most a year away from launch, is not a good sign. We should have seen a hell of a lot more by now, and my best guess as to how the non-seamless travel will work is something similar to the LEGO Skywalker saga, and I personally wouldn't have a major issue against that if the planets are small, simply due to the fact that in No Man's Sky with the seamless travel you can travel around planets significantly faster by going into space, as there's no air resistance and you travel much faster. Another thing we definitely need clarification on is the fact there are only going to be 4 major cities in Starfield compared to 1,000 planets. As I said earlier, that is not at all a good ratio, and it's likely we'll have to build as well as populate the other planets with player built outposts, like in Fallout 4 where there are only a few major cities and you were forced to do the rest. With 1,000 planets, they cannot be doing this. We need procedurally generated outposts and small cities to be dotted around planets, because otherwise Bethesda is relying far too much on the player to do their work and their job here. Similar to how this game will probably end up relying on modders to fix or add functions into the game like most of their titles have done in the past. In terms of a lot of the criticism Starfield is receiving for being eerily similar to No Man's Sky, in its gameplay reveal, I don't think the game will be entirely similar to No Man's Sky, based on what Todd has been saying about the lack of seamless travel and more. I think what's happening is Bethesda has seen the well-deserved success surrounding Hello Games' redemption arc and has wrongfully once again decided to mislead customers by marketing Starfield similarly to how No Man's Sky was. The gameplay of Starfield when shown outside of highly edited as well as short clips does not look similar to No Man's Sky, but during their highly edited segments intended for trailers it certainly does. Don't believe me, I'll show you some of IGN's comparison between how Starfield was showcased to how No Man's Sky was. I also want to clarify that if Starfield ends up like No Man's Sky, I do not particularly care, since there are a limited amount of ways to create a space exploration game, and frankly the game being potentially somewhat similar to it is not at all a problem. In fact, I would fucking love that. However, the way the game is being marketed is a major red flag, and people after Fallout 76 and Cyberpunk 2077 should be calling for more clarification surrounding Starfield, as well as criticizing what Bethesda is doing poorly. And with the blatantly similar patterns between the way this game is being showcased to players and how Fallout 76 was being promoted to consumers, it's obvious to non-fanboys that Starfield's gameplay trailer was heavily mimicking No Man's Sky's trailers. It is undeniable that people should be extremely cautious of Starfield, and I personally do not recommend anyone pre-orders it, especially if you are on console, since you won't have access to mods, which will probably fix 99% of the issues in the game. Wait until the game comes out and watch some trustable reviews before buying it. And with all of that being said, we have finally come to the end of this video, so please do not forget to do all the things YouTubers love to beg you to do, aka check out my Discord server, Twitter, as well as like, comment and subscribe. So now I'll see you all in the next video.